We're only 2 weeks into 2014, and it's a safe bet Sherlock Series 3 will remain one of the most talked about TV shows of the year. In the run-up to the show's return, which was back in late 2013, we spoke to showrunners, creators and writers Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss for the magazine on the set of 221B Baker Street. Also taking the time to talk to set design guru Arwell Wynne-Jones about the props you can see in the famous sitting room. You can hear Arwell's own words clicking on special parts of an expanded 360 panoramic view of the set on empireonline.com itself. The URL you need to type in is empireonline.com/features/Sherlock Apartment. Sherlock Apartment is just one word there. But once all 3 episodes were aired, we felt it was time to speak to Gatiss and Moffat once more about how they felt about the reaction to the new series, what bits were hardest to write, and the reappearance of you-know-who. So, for an hour of insightful chat with 2 of the hardest working folk in British television, pin back your earholes and listen to an hour's worth of interview goodness. But as there are spoilers throughout, be sure that you have actually watched all 3 episodes themselves in advance to listen to the rest of this podcast. So, if you're still with us, that's great news. Just so you know, the interviewers were myself, Ali Plum, and Nick de Semlin. Stephen can be differentiated from Mark because he has a Scottish accent, whereas Mark does not, so that should clear things up. I sound like myself, and Nick sounds like the other guy asking the questions. The game is, well, you know the rest, but here's the podcast. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll be back at the end once it's all over. Now, when I was at the Q&A for the first episode, a few fans were asking questions about Moriarty, and your response was they did not fake suicide at each other. Imagine how stupid you'd feel if they bumped into each other afterwards. And there was lots of laughter. How do you feel having said that? Like, how do you feel having totally pulled the rug out from under people? Is it a joyous feeling, the reaction?
Yes. I enjoyed the fact. I thought it was quite a good reply. I thought it made me laugh a lot, the idea of them saying, oh no, both of us. Oh, let's do it again.
You did that.
No, I did it. Oh, yeah. Having said that, we haven't explained to you the nature of the rug or the pool, so there you go.
It's all about the rug.
It is. It's actually about the rug. Oh, I don't know. I never quite know what people expect of Mark and myself when they ask us about the future of Sherlock. Do they expect us? Look, if I were organising you a surprise party, and which would be in itself a surprise, I suppose, and you asked me, "Are you organising me a surprise party?" I'd say no, because that's kind of what you do. Yeah. When you're doing things like so we either say nothing at all, we literally lock ourselves away, or we're not going to tell you what happens next. Of course. Why would we do that? You wouldn't even like it if we did.
You know, I've said this before, the famous Oscar Wilde quote, "The suspense is killing me, I hope it will last." And I think that's the truth of this. It's, hopefully we won't have to wait too long to find out, but we're not going to tell you straight away, and also, where would be the fun in that, really?
Yeah. You must be enjoying turning people into paranoid wrecks to an extent. The mad theories that I've heard, it may not be mad, but there's a theory that Sherlock has created this video of Moriarty himself. I don't expect you guys to confirm or deny anything, but
I didn't even know about the theory.
What's exciting about these theories
isn't the fact that we read them, because we don't. There are just too many. We'd do no writing if we did all that. What I like about it is that when people engage creatively with a show like that, what they're starting to do is make up their own stories, which is roughly how we ended up making Sherlock. Yeah. So I love that creative engagement. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the beginning of people becoming writers. I think people become writers this way. They say, that's not what I would have done. Or they come up with a different version of how this story could be. And one day, they end up writing their own story.
It's exciting. It's like writing Doctor Who in your exercise book at school. Yeah. What you do is you actually, we all used to come up with your own story, sometimes go back to them.
Yes.
But it's actually driven, it's not driven by sort of fury. I don't think it's driven by a desire to be like that and to create your own, contribute to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and actually, having had 2 years of spectacular dabbling with people's minds and all these wonderful theories, having now gone past that, we need some more. What are people going to do all day? The most amazing thing I was just saying actually was that quite reasonable sounding people who've genuinely asked which of the 3 theories was the truth. It's like, what?
To which I always reply the middle one.
Yeah.
It was an unconvincing dummy with a photograph of Sherlock on the front, and Moriarty and Sherlock eloped. That's exactly what happened. There are reviewers, people who are paid money to write words, and people who read those words who actually think that's a possibility.
One of them, I won't name names,
dear
one of the most
God.
extraordinary ones, which said that we've clearly been harvesting theories from online, which we genuinely have not. Obviously, you're just aware of them. And part of the reasoning behind making the fake explanation at the beginning as outrageous as possible was precisely that. What could be the most ridiculous thing, which would be, Mission Impossible style, Derren Brown, etc., etc. Yeah. But one very respected reviewer actually said they've even put in the popular online theory about the squash ball. It's like, no, that's how he did it, and it was in the end of the Reichenbach fall. I was gobsmacked by that.
There was another, what was the other reviewer? Was it A. Gill who announced the only reason that they brought him back because it was such a success? And we're saying, no, he wasn't even dead at the end of the previous episode.
Yeah.
He was behind a tree. Pay attention.
Yeah.
And as you keep saying, it's the 120-year-old spoiler.
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes always comes back from
But we do live in a strange world, really, where you've got people who have watched each episode. Some people have watched it, 300 times, and other people who only watched it 2 years ago and now are basing certain things on what they vaguely remember happened, as opposed to, it's
Before we get back to Moriarty, the Derren Brown thing, which of you came up with that?
I have a horrible feeling. Do you know what I think might have it was you? But I think you might at that point have read the first few pages of Day of the Doctor. And I think the fact that I referenced Derren Brown in that, I think unconsciously might have.
But also, Derren's a friend of mine, but it was really going to be like a kind of, what if someone had hypnotised him? We might as well just ask him. That was it. It was like, rather than having some person in a black cloak and a top hat and a stage moustache. But he was, thrilled to do it, and actually the way that we actually ended up shooting that, we had all kinds of worries that, because we had to go back to Bart's to stage it, that certain things would get out. But in the end, we were shooting so many false things and red herrings that it just didn't really leak at all, did it? No one could really tell the difference between Benedict jumping off because it was a stunt and Benedict jumping off because it was an explanation.
It is one of those things, though. I mean, as Mark was saying a few weeks, but as the episode approached, there's only really one thing he can do. And, there's only one way not to die, and that's to hit something before he hits the pavement. That's it. There isn't anything else. Yeah. He's got to land, essentially, on a big cushion.
But we left open the possibility, semi-mystically, that it might not be all it seems, which I think is the best way of keeping it going for the next 100 years. I mean, the other thing as well, we discovered a lovely review of The Empty House, Doyle's original, in which, of course, Doyle says that he escaped due to his knowledge of an obscure form of misspelled Japanese wrestling.
Baritsu?
Well, it's Baritsu, but it's actually, he calls it Baritsu and it's wrong. Yeah. And the reviewer basically says, "Oh, come on, Dr. Doyle." And it's rather thrilling, actually. It's the same sort of it's the same review.
And you were saying he got a similar reaction. You're kind of getting a cyber form of the reaction he got to killing off Holmes in the first.
In every detail, we get the same reaction.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. And in both cases, in both The Empty Hearse and The Empty House, you are dependent on Sherlock Holmes's own account of how he survived. Now, keep in mind that he's been lying for 2 years. Who's to say any version of Sherlock Holmes has told the truth about how he did it?
With Moriarty, the other M, one of the many M's, he's back. When did you decide to bring him back? At what point was this a kernel of an idea in your mind?
Well, it's more complex.
It is more complicated.
We've had certain aspects of what we're going to do mapped out for quite a while, for quite a long while. But really, we can't
really
say much
it's
more
about
than
the
that.
rug again.
Sure.
And that's not a clue.
No.
It's just a metaphor.
But it is not a last-minute whim.
That's not what I'm saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think some people might, and I wanted to remind them that
No,
that
not
isn't
at all.
the case.
Oh, no. I mean, because you'd have painted yourself into the most ludicrous corner.
Yeah.
No, there's been, and it was discussed ages ago. Yeah. And Andrew knew about it.
And we've genuinely been plotting out what we're doing next for quite a while now. So it's all considered.
How many people were in on it? Do you have like 25 homeless people
Yes.
that are aware of
At
it?
this moment, quite a lot. I mean, the Moriarty plan is known by a few others, but there are a lot else of the next 2 series that we spontaneously came
Nobody
up with
knows about that.
is just me and Mark.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have conversations
Get
with
down
each
bad.
other where you say, right, people are going to ask us these questions over and over. How are we going to respond to them? Because we can't reveal too much.
The awful thing is, genuinely, you have to take the fifth, don't you? That's it. As Stephen says, there's no point in trying to coax it because it would spoil it.
Yeah.
So in the end, you end up. I remember doing Graham Norton's show a couple of years ago, and every single question that was emailed to me, I basically went, no comment, and eventually went, oh, for Christ's sake, say something. But you end up in that situation, don't you? And you think, well, of course you do.
That's why because I've been doing this over 2 shows now, is just to have an answer. And just because no comment is itself an answer, sometimes you just think, well, to hell with it, it's fiction. I'll make up some more right now, and I just tell a straightforward porky. Then in fairness to me, I've always said that's exactly what I'm doing. Sometimes I said that. I didn't San Diego and said, I am lying to you. I'm lying to you right now. Why are you trusting
Well,
what
you
I
know,
say when I'm lying? And they still quote me.
One of my
Say, "I'm
favourite
lying."
things is that amazing Orson Welles film F for Fake. Do you know that? Which is all. Do you know it? It's fantastic. It's all about the history of contricts and at the beginning he says, but I absolutely swear to you for the next 90 minutes, everything I tell you will be absolute and literal truth. And then right towards the end of the film, it spirals into this extraordinary story about this con man you can't believe, and then he just sort of checks his watch and says, my time is up. For the last 10 minutes I've been lying my head off. And it's brilliant. It's really that's what we sort of do in miniature.
Well, let's go to something that we definitely can talk about. The 3 episodes have gone out there. They've been released into the world. Nick and I were talking about how in the previous series, I think it was you said that, Mark, that the most difficult episode was The Hound of the Baskervilles. What was The Hound of the Baskervilles for this season?
I don't know if we had. I mean, the thing about Baskerville inherently is if it isn't just a dog, or if you try and keep Sherlock in it, then you've got a problem. That was the reason that Doyle doesn't put him on the moor is that he would solve it instantly. So you in making an early decision to not do that, you have the inherent problem. What the hell is it then? That's why it became kind of intractable. It's a very difficult story. With this, I suppose. It's probably episode 2 because we wrote it with Steve Thompson. It was actually it was a very tough one to get right because it was a very big emotional story centering around the best man speech, also with attendant crimes. It was an early idea, really, wasn't it? That when you tell funny stories, they're actually for Sherlock. They're actually cases, which would be very neat.
It wasn't a nightmare. It was more about, and I would say that is the most audacious episode we've done, is to actually have the courage and the faith in the audience, which we have been rewarded for our faith in the audience. Say, no, that's fine. We'll do ages at a wedding before, and it'll be just before Act 3 kicks in. You'll think, oh, hang on, they've duped us. It's not just a wedding. It really is a case. But I think I love doing that. I think that's a brilliant thing to do. And the audience loved it, so we're good with that. But it wasn't so much difficult. There was. Essentially, I mean, Hounds was just. I mean, actually, I think sometimes, Mark, you forget that actually on your second draft it was really, really good. You just kept protesting that it didn't make any sense, and I kept saying
It never has.
It never has. The original book is the story of a man who kills another man by releasing a dog on Dartmoor. That's our starting point. But it was just trying to make sense of it, wasn't it?
And I suppose also, which is an unusual thing, really, is it's so famous, that one, that you're definitely wrestling with more familiarity than people have with any other story. I mean, The Empty Hearse is very little to do with The Empty House. His Last Vow is actually mostly... It's the beginning of The Man with the Twisted Lip, mostly Charles Augustus Milverton, and then a little bit. So it's we glance on certain things, touch on certain things, and then but Hound is the one that everyone knows the best. So it was
with Hound you actually had to do certain things. You had to go to Dartmoor, and it actually had to be Dartmoor that you went to, and there had to be a scary dog, and there had to be a showdown, and there had to be fog. There had to be all those things. Whereas people don't really know the story of His Last Vow or Charles Augustus Milverton, so you It's not that you want to play fast and loose, but you're not obligated to anything. And some of the stuff that you're obligated to in Baskerville is mad. It's mad. It's a lovely book, but if Sherlock Holmes had gone with Dr. Watson to Dartmoor, he'd have taken away. Not only would he have solved it, he'd have killed the atmosphere by simply saying, "No, obviously he's not a real ghost dog, is he? It's a man with a big dog." And there's the story gone.
You get that in the couple of stories that Holmes narrates himself in the original, which do not have the same thing, because he actually has to hide stuff from you as a narrator, which you never have to have with Watson, and it's just not the same.
You mentioned Magnussen. I really enjoyed what you did with Milverton, just turning him into a supremely irritating character who has so much power he can do whatever he wants to people. Can you talk about coming up with that character? Was that always the way you were going to go with it?
Well, it was part of a bigger discussion, wasn't it, about the shape of the series. That we were doing quite a lot of fun and humour and lightness, and quite a lot of character work on Sherlock, making him
Mary.
And then so that we were to get back to the rug, positioning a rug under the audience in order to pull it out. I mean, his last vow doesn't work as well unless you've seen those 2 episodes. That's what it's all about. It's about that sucker punch. In terms of the villain, we couldn't do another Moriarty because we'd done it.
And he was coming back.
If he is coming back. And it was just the kind of interesting thing was the darkness of the fact that in the original story, Charles Augustus Milverton he really hates him, which is unusual. He goes out, he has a little speech about how he looks like a snake, how he makes him ill. Now, Sherlock Holmes, I don't think ever talks about anybody like that. So that's interesting. Sherlock Holmes is getting emotional again, and you're always in trouble when Sherlock Holmes gets emotional. He likes to pretend he never does. The truth is, Sherlock Holmes gets emotional all the time, and it's always bad news for him or somebody else.
But there was also, we had a big discussion to me about what kind of a villain he would be, and the brilliant thing about Milverton as a character, and the reason that story is so good, is it's incredibly timeless. In fact, it's timely, really. That sort of person is out there now with his emails and letters. I mean, it's no accident that there's so much of it is about him owning newspapers, and it's essentially the same thing. So coming up with him as a very different sort of style to Andrew's baddie, and as he says, "I'm not a villain." He actually says it, because villains don't think of themselves as villains. He's just a businessman. It's all about power and money and manipulating people and being able to stick your finger in someone's pasta and then wash your fingers in their glass of water. So that it was, and then getting Lars doing it so with such an effortless, cool, and on that wonderful sort of blank-eyed thing, it was all came together really nicely.
It was that thing we were discussing. Remember you saying, "Is it a problem that he doesn't actually have a plan?" And we sort of talked about it. But he can't really have a plan because he's not a villain. He's not that kind of person. He wouldn't have a plan. He's perfectly happy. He just wants to carry on acquiring things.
Him sneaking the letters out of his jacket, that was a bit of a plan. He's baiting him to an extent, but it wasn't really, I guess.
I think he just plays. I think he doesn't. I mean, he was cute. He wanted to see what would happen if he went to Sherlock Holmes's house. He's a man who thinks he owns everything that he touches and sees and meets. Was curious about Sherlock Holmes. There was a line about that.
There was, because I've never had a detective before.
Yeah.
It's like he's collecting them. Collecting people.
Sorry. Did you have other ways in which you could breach people's personal space that didn't make it into the episode?
Actually, I did have one where he took a dump on.
It didn't work. That's in Mrs. Hudson's.
Is that a genuine thing?
No, it's not.
I
took a dump in Mrs. Hudson's fridge. No, actually, I did have one, and I sometimes wonder about it. Was one time, but then I realised it was Christmas Day, and it made so little sense that when Sherlock and John go to him, he's deciding to go for a swim, so he just takes his clothes off and gets into his speedos, and so he's so bored of them, so uninterested, so unaware that they're there, that he just behaves like that.
It would be like a Roman emperor. They just didn't even acknowledge the servants were there. It was they just put their hand out for something. That sort of just completely
that sense of entitlement, which is and he's justified. He's right. It's what brings him down. Of course, it simply doesn't occur to him that Sherlock Holmes might just shoot him. He hasn't factored that in. He doesn't think people can do that.
Was the flicking scene a difficult one to shoot in terms of people laughing?
Oh no, it was well.
No,
it was quite a tough day, that wasn't it? Because we had the helicopters and everything, and we ran out of time for interiors and stuff. But it was more about actually Lars and Martin working out where he could flick him without it becoming genuinely both painful and very annoying.
You see, I find that thing quite horrific.
Yeah.
It's unpleasant to watch, actually.
Yeah.
This is a strange thing to say. When I was a kid, there was a character in Grange Hill called Imelda. Do you remember her? Pretty well. She was a bully. And I used to get irrationally enraged by her bullying in Grange. I used to sort of scream at her. I used to shake my fist at the screen. And to me, it's got that sort of quality to it. It's hateful to see it.
Yeah.
And you know that he can just carry on. And when he says, which I think is a wonderful line, he says, "This is what I do to countries." It's completely true. Just like sticking a stick into a bee's nest. Just
That's exactly what Mycroft says. He's not doing very much harm. You know, he's just doing that because it amuses him.
Yeah.
And somehow this just it just gets on Sherlock's tits so badly he kills him. You know, which I think is just another interesting facet of that strange dark man in Baker Street.
I think for this, you talked about the second episode being the most bold, and I think what you persuaded me, you're right, it is the most bold in terms of character development over, case. But the third one, I ran out of fingers, but over 10 moments when I couldn't believe how many rugs you were putting out there. And the biggest rug for me was Agra. That is such a huge idea that you prepped from the very beginning. Were you nervous about that working? Because it's such a big idea.
You mean about Mary's real identity?
Yeah, just to change her entirely.
Well, we had two levels of nervousness, I suppose, but we're confident people, so we weren't that nervous. But one is you introduce Mary, who everybody had been saying you mustn't do.
Yeah.
You introduce the girlfriend. Well, famously, it can be a problem. It can be a problem. Yeah, I mean, very often, most Sherlock Holmes adaptations either ignore her or make her adversarial with Sherlock Holmes, which Doyle never does. First of all, implanting her there and saying, no, you'll be happier with if she's there. You'll actually be quite cheerful because she'll be fun and she'll like Sherlock Holmes. One of the interesting things. Do you remember in episode 1, we wanted a scene so badly between Sherlock and Mary, and you couldn't get it off the ground at all. So I had a pass at it, and I couldn't get it off the ground. It just didn't. You couldn't write it. It was boring. And that whole scene ended up with the addition of one line.
I like
it. And that was it.
I know. It's a great revelation.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to start there.
Yes.
But no, absolutely. And it was that thing you often say about that, the girlfriend in that sort of situation when you've got a healthy bromance, the last thing you want to do is for it to be a drag.
Yeah.
And you don't want Mrs. In the original stories, Mrs. Watson eventually ends up sort of giving him permission to go out and play, which is not much fun. So we wanted that, and then it became, let's just do something much more interesting with her. What if she's not at all? She appears. And because we had Amanda in mind from the beginning, we knew how completely she would sell this wonderful, lively, funny, sparky personality. But it would be brilliant to sort of pull.
It's a great way to conceal a twist. It is so there in plain sight in the first 2 episodes, but you are so relieved that she is up for the adventure. That's impossible. Nobody could meet Sherlock and John and just join in like that. She can recognise a skip code. She likes Sherlock Holmes. It's all there. It's all there right in front of you. She completely understands in that line in The Empty Hearse when she said, well, he'd need a confidant. She's completely there with all of it. Nobody would react like that, except you're pleased. You think, oh good, she's not going to be a drag.
Yeah.
Nobody wouldn't. She's meeting 2 complete maniacs, and she's fine with it. She's obviously a maniac.
What's interesting as well is that you plant these clues, but of course people do find them. It's not like they're deeply hidden. People just did a freeze frame and found them amongst ex-Lib Dem, disillusioned Lib Dem and Beg's Own Bread. They found the word liar and thought, but what's really lovely is that they just thought, but what could it mean? Not it's a definitive answer, and then it just sort of ends up teasing rather nicely into the actual revelation.
But there's just so much stuff, and I think I was talking to my sister, and she was saying I couldn't believe that I hadn't worked it out because there's liar, there's the skip code line. It's such a because for a moment Sherlock
looks at
it and goes what?
Yeah, but
and then you ignore it, and then there's a really plonked in bit in The Sign of 3. I have no friends. I'm an orphan.
Yeah.
There it is. Boom. and Sherlock doesn't react at all.
And the telegram from Cam.
Yes.
And all. There's a lot of stuff there. But it's nice, isn't it? It's actually that, no one has actually said, I guessed it. I called it.
But the audience are miss it for the same reason that Sherlock Holmes misses it. They like her.
Yeah.
And because they like her, emotion does get in the way. It is grit in the instrument. You don't want to believe
That's
that's
actually,
true.
think about that's something we talked about from very early on, was that because they would get on so well, it would actually sort of blindside Sherlock. And in his affection for her, certain things which might have just leapt out at him, he simply screams out. He doesn't see them.
We did have a question tweeted in. How did Mary get into Magnussen's office?
We actually did do that. We had our all sorts of acrobatics, didn't we? And he actually at one point goes over and finds the window open and all that. But it was just boring, so we didn't have. She got in ingeniously.
She broke in.
She's a highly trained intelligence agent. Who's doing a much better job of breaking in than John and Sherlock are. And if you actually think this through, which of course I have, is suppose Sherlock hadn't blundered his way in that night. She'd just have shot Magnussen, gone back to being Mrs. Watson, and not only that, they'd have carried on solving crimes together with this lethal killer nurse wandering along behind them, picking off anyone who might put them in danger. That would have been the show.
The thing that is intriguing now, though, is that after their reunion, which I think that Martin and Amanda's reunion scene is extraordinary. It's so beautiful and moving. But of course, she is still what she is. But that's we've got such a strangely dysfunctional group of people that they all just kind of, Sherlock says, "I know you shot me, but you also saved my life, so thank you." It's so strange, but it's actually that they've come together as a new kind of unit, really.
Yeah.
Not that unit of Doctor Who. There's no crossover.
No, that would be mind blowing. I've got to ask you about other crossovers, and the crossover I'm alluding to is 007. There were so many enjoyable.
Spotted.
How did I find that one out? 007 references, obviously in the first episode and in the final episode. You're a big Bond fan, I know, Mark.
We both are. Huge.
How enjoyable was it to put those in? Because some of them are reasonably subtle.
Do you mean like the
Blunt instruments?
in episode 1? Do you mean the Skyfall shot?
Skyfall shots.
That was honestly just. I mean, that was Jeremy, the director's decision. We wanted a shot over London. It's not exactly the same place. It is a little close.
You should have panned across and Daniel Craig.
He just goes, "Morning." Yeah.
I mean, I obviously went overboard, but I thought Mrs. Hutchinson Live and Let Live was enough to get me going, right, well, that's...
You're going overboard.
I'm going
I thought there was a bit of Die Another Day with the bedraggled Benedict at the beginning of...
Tortured and dead.
I'm sure we're reading into stuff.
There's a history of bedraggled.
Blunt instrument.
Blunt instrument is definitely that's deliberate. That's
Your colleague, is that Mycroft's colleague references?
Mycroft's colleague is there for M. So
the other M.
Yeah.
So many around. Yes, and the other question I wanted to ask you about was tubes. I wanted to ask whether Gill Sans is a font that's associated with, obviously, the Tube and Sherlock. Was that an intentional thing?
No, I mean, I've always wanted to do... I love the Tube, but the reason that Bruce Partington Plans is one of my favourite stories, which is in Series 1. From the get-go, I said, this is going to be on the Tube. I love lost Tube stations. So I'm just obsessed with them. And it's all from the web of fear, I'm sure, just now. It's all come true. All my dreams have come true. But... The font is not no, that was a design decision. It wasn't so much about that. No.
It's interesting because it was when you were in investigating the Tube, you discovered about Leinster Gardens.
Yes,
which we tried very hard to
get
into episode 1, and then had a short flailing period where we tried to get it into episode 2 before we finally managed to get it into episode 3, because I think it's the single most exciting thing in the world.
It's the coolest thing in the world, and I love the idea that people are now going to go there. And a friend of mine rang me the other night and said, "I lived on that road. I never knew."
Yeah.
All those years. It's just, but I watched it. It fitted perfectly, even though 1 is about the Tube, into 3 because it's about being a facade.
Yeah.
Hiding in plain sight. It couldn't be.
But by that stage, though, we were so frantic to get.
There must be a way.
There must be anything. Let's turn the entire plot round. We have to have Leinster Gardens and Sherlock.
Did you guys get to go down into some of these disused nooks and crannies of the London Underground?
I wasn't there, but
yeah. I mean, we shot most of it at Aldwych, which is the one you can use. But it was thrilling. I mean, it's the weirdest feeling of transgression, actually jumping down at the rails. You just go. But for me, the best bit was just exploring, and I've got some pictures somewhere, but, there's all these little bits, and there was just this wonderful bank of posters from 1972 from Madame Tussauds, and fragments of the Towering Inferno.
Oh, wow.
It's just like, it's magic. They're like fossils.
No cannibals. Like,
No, there was a man saying, "Mind the dog!"
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about Mrs. Hudson. I love what you did with her in this new series. It made me laugh a lot.
Well,
Cartel.
obviously, it starts in episode 1 of the first series that Sherlock has ensured her husband's execution in Florida. So we just extrapolated it from there. He's got this
Weakness, marijuana.
Yeah, well,
That's for a hit.
That's series 1 too.
That's for a hit.
Herbal
remedies for a hit.
remedies.
Yeah. And I think she might have been told it's something else.
I think the herbal soothers, that's what they were. I think it's interesting with Mrs. Hudson. There's a whole interesting thing to be said about the female characters in this, actually, because I almost forget now that Mrs. Hudson isn't really a character in Sherlock Holmes at all. She doesn't say anything, I think. Maybe in The Dying Detective, I think she's allowed to utter a line. She doesn't speak. So Mrs. Hudson is really our creation. Or rather, it's Stubbs. You've got Stubbs there, so you've just got to give her stuff to do, which is brilliant. And it's become more and more baroque.
But it's a lovely thing because over the years, Mrs. Hudson has been, in the Rathbone films, there's an actress called Mary Gordon, who's like little Mrs. Pepper Pot, and that's the sort of traditional version. But there isn't really an interior life. There's just the odd, "Oh, my shells, Mr. Holmes." Or actually, Irene Handel in
she's good,
Private Life is wonderful.
We nick one of her lines.
Yes.
There's a crying need for that.
And we will nick many more.
Yes.
But Una's just a national treasure and brings so much to it, such style and fun, and it's lovely to actually you don't have to do much, but just to sort of slightly spread it out. Her relationship with Frank was purely physical, and Martin doesn't want to hear anymore.
No, and he's already feeling ill. No, I loved it.
My favourite was I just did the typing. I can't tell she was doing the admin.
In my head now, there's this sort of Michael Mann version of her life in some sweaty Florida key in the mid-70s.
And it comes down to really what Sherlock Holmes says in that scene is, we all like each other. We're all a team. We're all the same kind of people. Right, we've all chosen each other. I mean, Mrs. Hudson wasn't like that. If she wasn't like that, she wouldn't put up with Sherlock Holmes upstairs. Of course she's like that. They all have to be like that. They're all maniacs.
I did start wondering how many YouTube hits her exotic dancing was inspired as well.
I'm sure you can find some from stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess a tricky kind of balancing act you guys have with this series is how much to humanise Sherlock, and this series brought him out of his shell more than we had seen before.
But the interesting thing about Sherlock Holmes is he's entirely human. He's not a little bit human, he's completely human. He's taken a decision, which is a frightening one, to suppress his humanity, to be a better detective. Now, that's what he says in the stories. He says it's emotions. He doesn't say he doesn't have emotions. He says they get in the way.
Sure.
So he frequently says things, if I had a daughter, if I were to be married, there's nothing that suggests he can't do it. And we've really elaborated on that with Mycroft saying caring is not an advantage. Yes. It's a mantra that they've developed between them, really, in a way. But what's really exciting is that behind it there's this massive floodgate of potential emotion. As Steve says, when you get frequently in the original stories, he's furious at some miscreant who's treated someone badly, and
particularly if someone treats a woman badly, he goes quite ballistic. There's what is it, Case of Identity, where he grabs a writing crop to beat someone up because he's just so outraged at their behaviour.
On the Baker Street Jubilee line, you see this picture of with a riding crop.
Yeah. And then also, and then famously, at the end of The Blue Carbuncle, he lets the criminal go. He does that a couple of times. He just goes, "Get out."
And he's so joyous when Sir Henry Baskerville isn't dead in the Hound. And actually, Watson says it's a flash of lightning on a darkling plain when you see just how much passion is behind those.
But having said that, we made a conscious decision this year that, in many ways, episode 1, as Doyle knew, is all about him coming back. The plot is completely in the service of the reunion and its repercussions for us. That's all it was about. But it's consciously lighter. Episode 2 is also a lot of fun, although it's very emotional. But we definitely and genuinely thought we're going to convince people that he's almost going soft because we know what's coming, and that was a completely conscious thing. And I think, as we've always said, what Dr. Watson does is round his edges off. He definitely is a different man by the end of the original stories to when we first met him.
Yeah.
But he's never going to be the same as us. But you have to go somewhere. In the third series, you want to have proper progress. And then I think what is properly thrilling and rug pulling is that you realise that he may have made some progress. But
It's also
That got me completely.
it's our sentimental assumption that Sherlock Holmes having an emotional life makes him nicer. It doesn't. It makes him he's just as frightening. He works out that the only way to stop Magnussen is to shoot him in the face. So he does. Most people can't do that. Most people wouldn't just think, oh, bang. He's in a good cause. He'll break someone's heart. He'll just do that as he does with Janine. So the fact that he's got an emotional life doesn't redeem him from being the madman he's always been, or well, he's not mad, but he's frightening. He's a frightening man.
In your minds, did he enjoy his short-lived relationship with Janine?
He genuinely likes her. We know that from the preceding episode. He's genuinely fond of her. The fact, that would make it. That would, in his mind, well, at least I'll be able to tolerate her company. The fact that he then crushes her the way he does is no different to how he behaves to John. He adores John, but he was perfectly and all the others. He's perfectly happy to pretend to be dead for 2 years and then, then think it's really funny if I just jump out of a cake and say hello again. So he's, that's what he is. He's frightening. I think he's genuinely fond of Janine. Yeah, and he's probably, if he needed someone on his arm to go to any function, he'd probably phone her up and say, "Oh, come on, don't be a bore."
There's some lines cut where they had a bit more of a rapprochement, but actually I think it's rather nice the way that she leaves him feeling a bit shitty about it all.
Yes, we did have this sort of thing where she forgives him more. She says something like, "I never would have married you anyway," and as she's going, she says, "But if we both end up alone, I've got a cottage that you paid for." So but it just felt wrong. It robbed her of her dignity. She punishes him, and she says that chilling thing to him, which is far more important. I don't think Charlotte's remotely bothered about his exposure in the press or the one show interview, but when she says we could have been friends, I think that gets to him. You can see him sort of flicker on that and think, so that's not good. Then you don't really do that.
We had endless debates about the fact, because obviously we were implying that there is more than companionship going on. But she actually says just once would have been nice. You can't. I don't think you can go that far.
Is Sherlock Holmes a virgin or not? You can't ever establish it. Oddly enough, they did the same in Private Life. They had a scene which established that he had done the deed, didn't they? But they cut it. Same thing. It's we just don't know. I personally can't imagine that he is, but you can't ever confirm it.
Would he wear the hat? Is the big question. Let's go to Magnussen. Yeah. It's a huge thing. It's the first time really where he can't figure out a way out of this. He shoots a guy in the head. It's cold-blooded murder. Was that a hard thing for you guys to put down on paper? I imagine there was a lot of debate about that.
It was again one of the first ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a heightened world. I remember getting a lot of, well, not from one particular person, a lot of grief on the first series about the fact that the guns were used so freely. It's like, this is not the world we live in. Because no, it's not. It's Sherlock Holmes. There's a 7'2" assassin called the Golem in episode 3 of the first series. This is not the world we live in. He's quite an obvious assassin to have hanging around. So there's that. But it's not a world without consequence, clearly. But you have to believe that Sherlock can do that as an ultimate sanction, and that even though there is a huge engine then put in place to get him out of the way because he's killed a public figure, that it's not the same. You don't want to get bogged down in some dreary procedural about it all. It's got a sort of operatic quality to it, which is what makes that ending, I think, very powerful.
It was partly because if you read Charles Augustus Milverton, Doyle is a much cleverer writer than he's generally given credit for. I think Dr. Watson, in the opening paragraph, tells you that he's about to tell you a porky. He's about to tell you, like he says, I even now must be very reticent and different. I think what really happened, and what Doyle is hinting at you, what really happened is Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson sat in Baker Street and said, we're going to have to go and kill him, aren't we? That's the only way we can do this. So they break in, kill him, and then Dr. Watson writes it up as if, when suspicion starts accumulating, he writes up a version of the story that is the murder.
It's a wonderful story, but it has a curious ending, as many of them do, probably just because Doyle was writing it quickly and left the room. But there is a character set up at the beginning who has been wronged.
Yeah.
And she should be the one who comes and it isn't. It's a random someone else who just they're hiding in their burglar masks behind the curtain, and this random woman comes and shoots Milverton in the face and then grinds her heel into his face. And it's odd, isn't it? But I mean, so really, it's just an extrapolation to say, well, he probably did. I think.
Well, we sort of have that moment twice. We have the woman break in, but it turns out to be someone you know, and then we have the actual moment of the shooting, which I think is what really happens. Is, of course, Sherlock Holmes offs him, and if Sherlock Holmes decided that somebody should die, he would kill them. I don't think I have any problem with that. He would be quite rational and quite cold about it.
And actually, going back to the whole reptile house shark tank thing, I think he regards Milverton as a sort of plague, something that should be eradicated.
You, in the first and second episodes, I felt from the first one, you kind of take the mick out of the Mind Palace. There's a certain joke, obviously, with a bomb that, I don't have everything in here. And in the second one, he can't remember the number for the room, and then, up comes Mary, and it's 207 or whatever. I have got to congratulate you on doing those two things, and then in the third one going, oh yeah, Mind Palaces. This one's the mother load. Here's the biggest one you'll ever see. This is bigger than Dan Brown's could possibly be.
It was more about implanting it.
Yes.
It was more. I mean, because we knew where we were going. We knew that all of Magnus's information would be in a huge mind palace. So, but how do we tell people what a mind palace is?
Okay.
So in the first episode, you get the reference to it, and it's the fun one. It's that because one of the most quoted lines, and one of my favourites, is in Hounds. Where he says about going, I'm going to my mind palace, and she's, but why is it a palace? It would be. I adore that exchange. Then we remind you of it in the first one. In the second one, we get a proper scene in it, and you say yes, you can actually walk into a room and talk to people. And think, so now you've got that secure, and now then in the third one, you have the whole sequence where he's shot, which is just to remind you, look, that you can have mind palaces and they can have lots of rooms, and it's really, really important. And the Redbeard
and all the
Moriarty.
Information that he
and
needs.
then you say, so an idea that a few weeks ago you had never heard of becomes, why didn't I see that coming?
But also, back to Doyle, it's even though when I first came across it in Hannibal, in the Thomas Harris book,
me too.
And the idea of it is so thrilling. But in a way, it's an extrapolation from Doyle from Sherlock's quote about a man's mind is like a lumber room, and it doesn't have elastic walls. There comes a point where for everything you put in, you have to delete something, and that became in the first series. Comparing it to a hard drive, and really that's what it is. So he does have to remove certain things, but yes, obviously for our sake, it has to be quite a big place.
Magnussen's got a lot of porn preferences stashed away.
I remember that discussion. There was your very early idea was that we see Magnussen going down into this strange vault, and then the big rug moment is that, of course, we've just been fooled.
Yeah.
It's not a real place at all.
Touching on that vault, when we see at the end of the first episode, and this is possibly showing my ignorance, we see Magnussen watching Sven-Goran Eriksson, just see the glasses, the bonfire.
Yeah.
Did he set up the bonfire? Was he behind all that?
Yeah.
So he's not a criminal, but he's okay with.
Yeah, but he does say in his last vow, he says he does very bad things, but he said, I had people standing by, I'm not a murderer. There was never any danger to you. And
What
he
was
says,
doing
I'm not a murderer.
He was testing
prodding.
Which way he gives his 5 more minutes.
Yeah, and he gives Sherlock. That's Sherlock's pressure point.
Yeah,
is John Watson.
Yeah.
So it's just an experiment, isn't it? What'll happen?
It's a lab rat experiment. He's petri dish.
Lab rat of Sumatra.
Yeah, the lab rat of Sumatra.
Have we seen Mycroft's Mind Palace yet?
It's all Mycroft's mind.
This is the whole show.
whole thing.
He's in a coma.
It's dangerously close to it.
There's a snow globe that just comes out.
No, we haven't.
I think I'd be reluctant. Does he even have one? Does
The thing is,
Mycroft need one?
The thing is, the great joke I think about Mycroft from the beginning is that he's smarter than Sherlock. Showing that is very tough because the deductions are in any case very tough. The best way to do it is very lightly. Again, first series when he says, was that why you spent the night on the Lilo? And he goes, sofa, Sherlock. There's absolutely no way. But you just do it like that because actually it's even harder. So I think to go bigger is somehow a bit reductive, oddly enough. There, I think you'd probably till we do it.
But also, I remember putting the line in this ridiculous memory palace of yours. It almost implies that Mycroft just says, "Why don't you just remember it? Why don't you just keep it?"
Well, again, that's the same function, isn't it? It's like saying, "I don't need one."
We asked some of our readers on Twitter to send in questions. I think one of the most popular ones was the third Holmes brother, which you guys alluded to.
Oh, we alluded to this.
The other one.
Now, you're not going to be able to really answer this.
We're actually referring to the very obscure Richard Breyer's Michael Gambon sitcom of that name from the late 70s.
I remember the other one.
Yeah,
It was very good.
Strange show. It was very strange.
It was funny, though.
Yeah.
First time I ever saw Michael Gambon.
Yeah. There we are.
Well, there you go. And who can say whether that's an idea or just yet another of our throwaway bits of mischief?
Maybe the thread of a rug.
Yes, it could.
More rugs. Rugs in the carpet warehouse. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard another mad theory that is Moriarty, but anyway, we won't get into all that. I guess
Moriarty.
there's more fan theories for the show than any show out there, isn't
But
there?
it's fun, isn't it? It's fun.
I know, Stephen, you
fun.
talked at the BAFTA screening recently about how you don't like going online and looking at what people are saying. But
well, because one, I think we have to be pure and write the show kind of for ourselves, which is really what we do. But also, some of that stuff does get if you're involved in two shows that are hugely beloved, it seems to be your fate to be hated. To have people make up the most awful rubbish about you.
Also, it's what your grandma used to say: if you don't listen at the door if you don't want to hear anything bad about yourself, and if you can resist that temptation, then you're absolutely fine. Just don't do it because
Eavesdroppers hear no good of themselves.
You will not hear. You'll just and it's a bit like reading reviews actually. Somehow your stupid self-destructive instinct is to go yes, superlative 5 stars. Oh fuck, he hates me. And you focus on the one that's just horrible.
Well, and if you listen to us talking, it's ludicrous. I remember getting into some rage because we had got 4 stars and something. I said, where's the missing star? What's wrong with that? What does that empty star mean? What are they saying? So you have to stay away from it.
But you also, to be very clear about it, I think we both think it's absolutely amazing the amount of activity that is generated, the levels of devotion. But the other 100% of the audience, i.e. the people who've waited 2 years and go, oh, I like that show. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in this series, particularly in episode 1, we've had some fun with, like having the Moriarty and Sherlock kiss. Which, to be honest, the reason that's there, and I have honestly not been scouring, is I thought that was the one combination that nobody did. That's why I thought that would be funny. But we've had some fun with that, but it's not the idea that somehow it's all in service. I read a review the other day that said this season was meant to be the one that was for the fans, and now they've really darkened it. And I thought, who said that? Where was that public statement? So it's not, it's, as Steve says, we've got to be, we're doing it for ourselves always. We have to be aware of it, and particularly with the Empty Hearse. When we worked out how he did it, we had no idea it was going to become such a vast talking point, and that absolutely meant that when we came to the solution, we had to acknowledge the fact that it would become a huge talking point. Hence the fake theories, because we're playing again, not playing with the expectations of a tiny minority. We are playing with the expectations of 10 million people who were all desperate to know. So it would be very different if it was focused on some minority of hardcore fans, but everybody wanted to know. So that's what it was for.
Well, just to bring back a sense of backslappery, which I feel like I have a rare opportunity to give you, I absolutely loved the scene where Mycroft and Sherlock have a deduction off over the bobble hats. Of each other's writing, are there moments where you go, that's a very good scene, I wish I'd written that? Is there a little bit of that? And how does it work in terms of you giving each other passes of each other's work, where you read a scene and go, how about we do this? Does it work like that, or...?
Well, we've always it's very collaborative. It always has been, because it's our show. It's
it becomes very hard to remember.
Yeah, it does.
It all gets interwoven. Well, I remember reading the creepy scenes in Hounds with the burglar light coming on, and it was beautifully set up by Mark. And it's not so much, I think, to be honest, I wish I'd written that. I just think, yes, we've got that. That's never been done. We've never had a scene about burglar light, as far as I know. Assaulting stuff. So that's the sort of thing.
I remember. I remember coming up with the idea of the proper explanation of how Sherlock had done it at that stage of the script.
Yes, that was a great
and thinking
idea.
I had a feeling in the back of my neck. I thought that's where it belongs. And actually, the idea of going out of a whiteout of an apparent explosion to the explanation, I thought, that feels chewy.
I think that was that was a stellar bit of that's a stellar story decision. Is that just when you think you're not going to get the explanation, just when you've forgotten that that's a problem, there it is.
Yeah.
But I remember, things like the rapprochement with Mary and John is so beautifully written. And we're slapping each other's backs now, but it is.
Yeah.
But also, the one I remember the most vivid response, and this is a crucial thing. This actually, when Steve finished Scandal in Belgravia, in the first version, Irene Adler died. It was always left like that's what had happened, and then you deliberately held back the truth to avoid it being a spoiler when you sent the script again, and that's the way to play it, because in fact the absolute truth is you can get very used to things which a few weeks ago made you gasp, and then you start to think, I wonder if people, whatever. But that you sort of need to play that game. We play that game between ourselves. Yeah. You hold things back and say, "Oh no, they're like that. You like that," and it's it becomes a sort of game like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the first person you're road testing the surprises on. And it's Mark and Sue are the first people who are going to read this. So there's two things I held back on about. In that case, it was in Belgravia was I am Sherlocked. And the very last minute, well, of course he saves her, he's Sherlock Holmes moment, which is satisfying because, well, he would, wouldn't he? But for the most part, we have discussed so closely the scenes and how it's going to work and what the emotional effect will be and what it will accomplish, that it becomes hard to remember or to disentangle.
Well, you were saying about that line of Mary's, I like him. That that took several goes of a scene that it had some nice things, but it was unnecessary.
It made it to the read through.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten that, but it was at the read through that scene, and we just sat looking at it. I think this is flat as a pancake. It's just not there.
Strange.
Despite good jokes, didn't work.
One tiny moment that really impressed me was the fur cough. Was that you?
I'm afraid.
Bravo.
I saw someone getting slightly knocked at that, saying it's a very silly joke, and I'm thinking it's Sherlock Holmes. Come on, but it was. I love that. I love the whole
like a
scene
naked gun,
and the finger and all that. It's brilliant. I
love the
all
double thumbs up from Mary when she's
There's that. Well, that's a beautiful scene. I think when
that's
when they're both independently thinking that they're running each other, and she's actually running them. I think that's lovely.
And her blouse had thumbs up and thumbs down on them, and I don't know whether that's intentional or not, but
not intentional on our part.
She's got Facebook likes up and down on the top, and she goes,
I didn't know that.
And I just went, what? This is another level.
There's so many things like that you
production design sinks in,
and also people will write dissertations about them, and you go,
I didn't know idea. Well, it might have been somebody else's deliberately. Because at the moment, Jenna Coleman's playing scenes with Peter Capaldi, and she's wearing this top that's covered in bow ties, which is.
Just a couple of final things to make this properly exhaustive. Redbeard, you tweeted Redbeard. People went mental. Is there more to that coming, or is it?
You've seen it, really?
Yeah.
So actually, to be honest, I put that into the first draft of episode 2, and actually explained it, that the reason that Sherlock was behaving like a child is because he'd once upon a time fallen for that story, that like your bunny rabbit has gone to live on a farm somewhere, and then we thought, no, let's hold it back because you can tease it a bit, and we were genuinely thought we can keep this running for years, but then actually
it's nice to resolve it.
Yeah, because there's so much that's unresolved. It's quite nice to just So that's the truth is that when he was little, and obviously Mycroft tormented him about it, is that his dog died, and he totally fell for the idea that Redbeard had gone to live in a happy valley somewhere.
Oh,
Poor
that's quite
thing.
moving. And young Sherlock, obviously played by your son, very well.
Yeah, that's how we kept that secret successfully, didn't we? Yes. Well, that was a strange one, I have to say, because my little boy is actually very good, and he was in school shows and something, and he kept saying to me, "Can I ever be in these things?" I'm saying, "No, you can't. You absolutely can't." So we did get to a situation where we said, "Okay, you can audition for this one, but your mother and I will not be involved in the decision."
Yeah, you stepped back completely.
And we said to everybody, because we have mixed feelings about sending a child into the acting profession, and we said, and we told everyone else, you choose the one you like best, and not be a vote, and we are not voting. So he got the part legitimately. He did actually get it.
He's very good, isn't it?
And I remember telling him, and he said, "You are the worst dad." And I said that I'm not. I think the chances are you've got like a 1 in 5 chance. The chances are you won't get it, and I'm not going to help you. So that's thing to say.
Remarkably, once put the blue contact lenses in, and his naturally curly hair dyed and styled slightly differently, he's actually not a bad guy at all.
There's a moment when it cuts from Louis looking round to Benedict looking round. It's really completely believable that that's the same person.
And he gets a mini coat, a mini...
Yeah, we didn't go as far as that. We just let him sort of.
We'll shortly have that problem like with little Amelia Pond think, it might be nice to do a little bit more, and then you realise that actually suddenly he's 6'3", and everything has changed.
In my head, watching him, I just went, I suddenly want to know exactly what it was like to be a school child Sherlock Holmes. More than that, what it would have been like to be one of his school friends in a classroom where he is being him.
I think it would just be... that's the CBeebies version, isn't it? And what it will be is Louis as young Sherlock Holmes, but just Mark as Mycroft. Exactly the same.
Telling
no
him
different.
In a school uniform.
No.
I mean, we've been bold, as you know, bold this year, and we've brought the parents in, things like that have never really been done, because it's, I suppose we feel confident it's our version, and people are like that.
I was thinking about this. It's a function of the updating. You look at the Victorian Sherlock Holmes, you have no expectation of him having a relationship with his parents. You wouldn't even think about it. But in the modern world, a man in his 30s, living in London, living in our much smaller world where we can get everywhere, he's going to know his parents. He just is. They're going to visit.
It's nice still to just drop the odd hint, as opposed to as soon as you do it all. People say, can we see Sherlock and Mycroft as little boys? And actually, we've done a little bit of it, but it's better to hint, because now we've in a way come up with a new mystery, which is, how did these two lovely, ordinary people come up with these creatures?
But I think there's also, I think we've been bold about is saying that in many respects they are ordinary. I mean, the fact they're sitting playing Operation. There's a big streak of ordinary in those men too. They're exceptional people, but in a way, again, I think we're just being faithful to Doyle. He's a person. They're just people, exceptional people. That most of the adaptations of Sherlock Holmes have made him more inhuman than he is in the originals.
And actually, it's interesting that in the documentary the other day, Douglas Wilmer is reading that fan criticism saying, you made him laugh, what are you doing? Is that usually those sort of reactions are from people who don't know the stories at all well, because if they did, they'd know how much more is going on under the surface of this.
This is interesting, isn't it? Because we actually said early on, these people kept asking about the drug taking, and we say he laughs more often in the books than he takes drugs. He actually laughs quite a lot in the stories. He's got a sense of humour. He's not at all solemn.
The Man with the Twisted Lip was an opening that I thought you were going to use earlier, because I love it as an opening. I thought it's such a wonderful twist, but then you add in Watson being this kind of, you call that a knife type conversation, and I thought, well, with Twisted Lip, was that something that was in the bag that you were looking to do earlier, or?
We've had lots of conversations about the stories we'd like to do, but it's more about when something comes up, isn't it? That it
I remember deciding to do it and not telling you. I said, I'm going to borrow an opening from the story, and if you think about it, I'll bet you'll get it. That's what I'm going to do. But I can remember the same moment in Hounds, where we were just the beginning of that, I think, utterly brilliant client scene, I have to say. But was when you came up with the idea, let's just borrow Black Peter and have him come through the door, and it so lifts the beginning of that.
I was
scene.
on a train, as we always are, and it just needed a lift, and I just read Black Peter on the train, and it's a story that's never done it's quite straightforward, but it has this amazing arresting image of him coming back with a harpoon covered in pig's blood. It's like, well, hello.
We've got to let you guys go to stitch some new rugs.
Okay.
Just as a final thing, seasons 4 and 5, or series 4 and 5 to do the British version, have been announced now. In a manner of speaking.
Well, we've said that we've got ideas from. It's not exactly the same things announcing.
Well-
Look, I mean,
So long as Benedict and Martin want to do this to BBC, and given that it's it's the third series is outrated the first two, which is an extraordinary sentence because that doesn't happen in television. It always goes the other way. Of course, the BBC will keep wanting to do more Sherlocks. I think, was it Ben Stevenson said the other day, it's commissioned for the next 50 years or something. Of course it will be.
We've quoted him.
It's just, but we've got to, we've got schedules to arrange and all that.
But
frankly, starvation works. So.
yes, everyone's very keen, and we
Yeah.
don't. But it's a fascinating prospect. Is where we might take it next. But
Yeah.
but it is genuinely very difficult, and that's not for want of trying to get everyone together for.
Give a Billy Wiggins spin-off in the meantime.
All these
Or
spin-offs,
even
people.
Sherlock.
People keep asking for spin-offs, and you think, well, do you want that, or do you
No,
want
we
the
don't.
show? It's hard enough to make the show.
But in terms of ideas, you've talked about how you got together on a bus on the set of the last
Very
series.
because you couldn't get a train. You should have hired a special.
and kind of plotted some stuff. Is any of that in script format yet? What stages?
Actually, we're meeting on Friday, aren't we, to talk about the next one?
You don't stop, you guys.
No.
And you're excited about it. I can sense
Very
that you're.
Yeah,
excited.
we had on that occasion we were just sheltering from the rain. Really, it wasn't a scheduled meeting. We were just getting out because it was really whacking down, and we just sat idly chatting. We came up with a whole set of things that I think are really, really exciting. But you have to wait and see.
As ever.
We certainly will.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very
Fascinating.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was it, Empire's spoiler special for Sherlock Season 3. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, of course, please do subscribe to the Empire podcast if you're a newcomer, or just share it with your friends because it's great to spread the love. There'll also be a transcribed version online in a feature form so that if you want to analyse what was said in more detail, that's also available for you. Thanks again, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. If you have any comments or queries, please send emails to podcast@empireonline.com. Thanks again. Bye-bye.